بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبع هداه أما بعد. In yesterday's session we looked at the beginnings of the Sifat al-Aridah, or the attributes and the characteristics of recitation and related to Tajweed that are not from the origins of the letters themselves and from their intrinsic characteristics, but those affairs that come upon the letters when they are connected to other letters. And the first chapter that he looks at in discussion of this is Bab al-Tafkhim wa Tarqiq, the chapter related to Tafkhim and Tarqiq. And we said that Tafkhim is the recitation of letters in this heavy, dense manner, and that is a reference to 7 letters in specific. Khussa Daghtin Qidh, the 7 letters of those words, this 3-word combination. And so any of those letters, they are to be recited mufakhaman, that is, with this heavy or in this dense manner. Ta, Kha, Sad, Ghain, Wad, Va. These are all letters, ikhwan, that are recited with this in this dense manner, this heavy manner. Then we said that we have those letters that are muraqqaq, and that is that they are recited lightly. And we said that the origin is that the rest of the Arabic alphabet, they are all recited lightly. So everything other than the 7 letters present within Khussa, Daghtin, Qidh, all of the other letters are to be recited lightly when one comes upon them. And so immediately we have a benefit in relation to our own personal qira'ah, our own personal recitation. Those things and those letters that we're acquainted with reciting heavily, then they need rectification. Yani, regardless of what one is acquainted with, and because the reality is we are oftentimes and regularly subject to what we have from habitual practice. And sometimes, ikhwan, even after knowing these ahkam and knowing these rules, you still find yourself falling into what you may have practiced habitually many years ago, or the manner in which you recited or memorized of a certain surah, mathalan. That you'll find yourself habitually falling into that practice. And of course, the only way to rectify that is to just pay attention to yourself upon qira'ah, pay attention to what you're reciting. And we benefit hugely from looking at the mushaf when we recite, even when we're reciting something that we have memorized. There is great benefit, ikhwan, from an-nadhari fil mushaf, that a person actually physically looks at the mushaf and looks at the pages when he revises, when he recites. There is huge benefit. It is greatly beneficial for establishing that which one has memorized, and it is likewise greatly beneficial in relation to the implementation of certain rules, that when one is actually looking at the mushaf as he recites, he comes across a letter that he has been reciting as long as he's memorized that surah, mufakham, and he's been reciting it heavily, and it is from the letters of Tarqiq. And so he looks at the letter as he recites and he realizes, subhanAllah, I didn't pay attention. Actually, this is muraqqaq. And so he rectifies the mistakes that he made previously. That is, of course, in the absence of him having a regular teacher that he recites to on a daily basis. The regular teacher, and the origin is, as he memorizes his Quran, he recites what he's about to memorize to his teacher, he rectifies his recitation, and then he goes away and memorizes. And then he recites the following day, what he has memorized from hifdh and from his memory. And then his teacher pays attention to his recitation, corrects those errors that he may be falling into, whether knowingly or out of negligence and laziness. And then he moves on the following day in a similar manner. And so the Rectification of the qira'ah, ikhwan, is improved when we look at the mushaf, even when we're reciting what we have already memorized. And so we look then at the letters of tarqiq, and as we said, that they are all muraqqaq, all of them. All of the letters are muraqqaqa. They are all recited in this light manner other than the letters of tafkhim. And they are the letters of isti'la, khussa, daghtin, qidh. And then we said that there is an exception with 3 letters. And there is an issue as it relates to the recitation of 3, or there are issues as it relates to the recitation of 3 letters that we have to pay attention to. Yani, these 3 letters, there is much from khilaf and difference of opinion, number 1. And number 2, there are some slightly variant rulings that go against the normal principle, the general principle of those letters that should be recited with tarqiq. Then there are some rules that we should pay attention to in relation to these 3 letters. And we said that the 3 letters are alif, ra, and lam. And if you want to memorize them, or an easier way of memorizing the 3 letters, just remember these 3 letters occur at the beginnings of some surah. Alif, lam, ra. And so these 3 letters, alif, lam, ra, they are the 3 letters, ikhwan, that we have to pay attention to because there are rulings related to them. The letter that has the most rulings and the most issues is ra. And thus you see that Imam al-Jazari, he follows the bab of tafkhim and tarqiq by discussing and looking at ra. In the general bab, in the general chapter of tafkhim and tarqiq, he makes mention of common mistakes. Mistakes that occur, for example, with hamza, mistakes that occur with alif, mistakes that occur with mim, mistakes that occur with the ba, and people not paying attention to the importance of making tarqiq in relation to them falling in particular places. That which is connected to something from qalqala, even though the topic of qalqala will come back up, inshallah, as we move along. Mistakes related to ha, mathalan. He makes mention of them because they are common mistakes, and so he mentions them as an introductory study of the topic and of the subject of tarqiq and tafhim. And then he goes into detail with bab ra. He begins with ra because ra is the most intricate of them. We mentioned that which is related to alif in, I believe, yesterday's session, and we said that the principle with alif is relatively simple. Alif is only used for elongation, as we mentioned. We must make a difference between alif and hamza. Hamza is the letter that we oftentimes confuse for alif. Alif is confused, or hamza is confused for alif because of the fact that sometimes alif of one hamza is written and is seated on top of an alif. And so what is understood from that is that the alif is the letter, while the hamza is the letter, the alif is its seat. The origin with alif is that it is used for elongation purposes only. And so it is added to the end of a letter to extend the letter. Al-Zalimun, Ar-Ra'un. The alif is added to the end of a letter to extend it. And we said that the principle is general and simple in relation to alif. If alif is added to a letter that has tafkhim, then it is mufakham. If it is added to a letter that has tarqiq, then it is muraqqaq. Simple principle. If we remember that, then we'll remember the bulk of what is related to alif. There are 1 or 2 issues that are connected to alif and hamza that will come as we move on, inshallah. But that is a general principle that we need to remember in relation to tarqiq and tafkhim as it relates to alif. If it is added to a letter that is muraqqaq, then it is muraqqaq. We said that ba, for example, is from the letters and from the huruf al-muraqqaqa. The origin is that it is constantly muraqqaq. Ba is constantly muraqqaq. So if ba is added, if an alif is added to the ba, on the basis of its tarqiq, then it too is muraqqaq. ادخلوا عليهم الباب. ادخلوا عليهم الباب. This bab is different to bab, which is an easy mistake for us, particularly Westerners, to make, speakers of the English language. Al-batil, al-batil. Similarly, the ba or the alif is added to a ba and extends a ba. The ba is from the huruf of tarqiq, therefore its recitation is muraqqaq. In any case, we move on then, ikhwan, to bab ar-ra. And because of the fact that ra is from the more intricate of the subjects, it is the bab that he follows the general chapter of tafkhim and tarqiq with. So we enter into bab ar-ra. Bab ar-ra, ikhwan, as we've mentioned, there are some general principles that we'll mention initially. And we will then ultimately, once we finish the chapter, we'll go back upon the statement of Al-Imam and his speech from the lines of poetry themselves. But what you need to know generally is that Imam al-Jazari, he generally mentions that which is connected to the affair of tarqiq of ra. And he mentions generally the affair of tarqiq as it relates to ra. Tarqiq. Then he makes mention of a difference of opinion in relation to ra, because the difference of opinion is small in number. And then it would follow that anything other than that is mufakham. And so he mentions generally the affair of tarqiq. Then he makes mention of the difference of opinion between tafkhim and tarqiq. And therefore, whatever is left is recited mufakham. We'll mention some general principles. Then we're going to mention and begin in today's session with the instances when ra is recited with tafkhim. The instances when ra is recited with tafkhim. After mentioning the general principles, the first of the general principles, so these are the general principles, ikhwan, that you need to take note of. The first of the general principles, ikhwan, number one, is that the thing that we look upon and the thing that we observe in relation to tarqiq and tafkhim of ra is that which is related, ikhwan, in its origin to fatha, kasra and dhamma. Fatha, kasra and dhamma. Tarqiq, as it relates to ra, is built upon kasra. Yani the ra being connected to kasra. And I say connected to kasra because you're going to see how it doesn't necessitate that the ra has a kasra upon it itself, but it is connected to kasra. And tafkhim is based upon fatha and dhamma. Yani, if the principle, if the categories that we're going to mention become too much, then try and return back at least to the general principle, and that is tarqiq is related to kasra and tafkhim is related to fatha and dhamma. Very broad and basic principles that we're going to see the manifestation of them as we go along. So that is the first thing, or the first and second thing that we want to look at. Tarqiq is connected to kasra and built upon kasra. Tafkhim, this heavy recitation of ra, is built upon fatha and dhamma. That is, again, to reiterate, we're speaking here about ra. This is babur ra, that which is related to the recitation of ra. So again, tarqiq, reciting it lightly, is built and based upon kasra. Reciting it in a heavy, dense manner is built and based upon fatha and dhamma. Jameel. The second thing or the third thing that we'll mention in relation to the affair of kasra and fatha and dhamma in connection to ra and it being muraqqaq or mufakham is that sukoon upon the ra, the sukoon upon the ra does not change and affect the ruling that is to be applied to the ra. Sukoon upon the ra and sukoon before the ra, it does not affect the ruling that is placed upon it. We always look at the haraka that is before the sukoon. What is the haraka that is before the sukoon? And so, if we have a ra and it has sukoon upon it, the thing that we're looking at in order to determine whether it should have tarqiq or tafkhim is the haraka before the sukoon. If we have a ra, it has sukoon, and the letter before it has sukoon, then we're looking at that which is before the sukoon. And so we have a letter with haraka, followed by a letter with sukoon, followed by a ra with sukoon. The thing that we're looking at is that letter and the haraka that is upon it. And so sukoon then does not affect the ruling that is placed upon the ra in terms of tarqiq or tafkhim. So the first category that we're going to look at is the instances of tafkhim of ra. Yani, when is ra to be recited in this heavy manner? We'll begin with the first of them. You're going to need a pen and paper, ikhwan, if you don't have one before you, just to make this list of instances. The first instance that we mention is, number one, if the ra is maftuha, then it is mufakham qawlan wahida. If the ra has a fatha upon it, then there is no doubt whatsoever concerning the fact that it is mufakham. Yani, it is recited with tafkhim without any doubt whatsoever. وَرَبُّكَ 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 يَخْلُقُ مَا يَشَاءُ. رَبُّكَ here, it has fatha, it is mufakham qawlan wahida. Mufakham without doubt. Without any doubt, ikhwan, it is recited in this heavy manner. So this is the first of the principles. That, number one, or the first of the instances, that is, number one, the ra is recited with tafkhim if it has a fatha upon it. And so, ربك مثلا وجعل فيها سراجا وقمرا منيرا. سراجا سراجا. Here, ra has a fatha upon it, and so it is mufakham qawlan wahida. Number two, the second instance that when ra has tafkhim is when it is madmuma. That is, when it has a dhamma upon it. If the ra has dhamma upon it, then it is recited with tafkhim. رُحَمَاءُ بَيْنَهُمْ رُحَمَاءُ بَيْنَهُم. رُحَمَاء. Yani, we hear clearly the tafkhim. رحما بينهم تراهم ركعا سجدا يبشرهم ربهم يبشرهم remember the ba has tarqiq يبشرهم this ra مفخم روهم والآخر هو الأول والآخر والباطن والركع السجود رحما. All of these instances then are instances of tafkhim of the ra. Number one, if it has fatha upon it. Number two, if it has dhamma upon it. Number three, if the ra has sukoon upon it and it comes after a letter that has fatha upon it. And the sukoon, incidentally, is asliya. That is, it is part of the word. The ra in this word occurs with sukoon. That is how that word is. And not the sukoon al-arid, which is another type of sukoon. Yani the sukoon al-aridan is the sukoon that falls upon a word because it falls at the end of a sentence or the end of a statement. We're going to stop upon it. Ordinarily, it doesn't have sukoon. But because we're stopping upon it, it now has sukoon. That is the sukoon arid. And we're going to come to a mention of that. And so, if it has sukoon upon it, that is the ra within this letter, within this word, it has sukoon upon it, and the letter that was before it has fatha, then it is mufakham. مثلا السماوات والأرض يعني the ard here, ra has sukoon upon it with the word ard. And so, even though it has sukoon, the sukoon has in it this tafkhim. It is a heavier sukoon. في السماوات والأرض وارحمنا. So here the ra, even though it has sukoon, it is recited, the ra al-musakkan is recited with tafkhim. It is recited heavily. Now, but as far as if we have what is known as the sakina, that has sukoon because of what is known as, or due to, or the type of sukoon is the sukoon arid, as we mentioned, the sukoon that comes at the end of a word, and one is going to stop upon it. So it now has sukoon because of the fact that we stopped upon it, not because of the fact that the letter aslan is supposed to have sukoon, as is the case with ard. Ard aslan, from its origin, ard is written with ra with the sukoon. But the following instance is the sukoon arid. What should be known is that if we have a ra which has sukoon arid, that is, it comes at the end of the word, and so it is considered arid. In that sense, it comes at the end of a word and we're going to stop upon it, then it now has tafkhim if the letter before it has fatha. If the letter before it has fatha and we're going to stop upon it, even though it itself in its origin doesn't have sukoon, but we're going to stop upon it, so now it has sukoon because we're stopping, it is likewise recited with tafkhim. And so, for example, على قدر يا موسى here على قدر يا موسى, it in its origin has ra, it has afwan kasra upon the ra. على قدر يا موسى. But because we're stopping upon it, على قدر, على قدر, if we were to stop there. على قدر now, because we're stopping, it has sukoon. This sukoon is now given tafkhim. Even though if we were to make wasal, and that is that we continue our recitation, the letter actually has kasra. And we said that tarqiq revolves around kasra. But here, because we're stopping upon the letter, it no longer has kasra. Because of the stoppage, it now has sukoon. And the letter that is before it has fatha. And we said that the principle is, if the letter before a ra with a sukoon upon it has fatha, then it is recited with tafkhim. Similarly here, when we stop upon it, ala qadar, ala qadar, this, the ra, qadar, qadar, we can hear it has a heavier sound. It is not qadar, qadari, qadar, with the light qadar, qadar. Here, the ra then has sukoon upon it because we're stopping, not because sukoon is from its asl. And so, because of the stoppage, the ra now has tafkhim. But if we were to make the wasl, then the ra now becomes muraqqaq. على قدر يا موسى, على قدر يا موسى. Now, because we continue, because we haven't stopped and we've continued, the ra has a kasra upon it. And we return back to the general principle. When the ra has a kasra upon it, then the origin in relation to tarqiq of the ra is kasra. We hope that is clear, ikhwan. So if we're going to stop, the stoppage now turns that kasra into a sukoon. When we look at the letter that is before it, it has fatha. The general principle is the letter that has, or the ra, when it has sukoon upon it, if the letter before it has fatha, then the fatha causes the ra to have sukoon. Ard has sukoon. But here, ala qadar, because we're stopping upon it, the letter before it has fatha, therefore, ra here is mufakham. The following place, an instance, when ra is recited with tafkhim, is if the ra has sukoon upon it. Again, we're looking at ra with sukoon upon it. And the letter before the sukoon has dhamma. As we said, tafkhim revolves around fatha and dhamma, while tarqiq revolves around kasra. And so here we have a word, but the word has in it a ra with sukoon upon it. We look at the letter before the ra, because it has sukoon, doesn't have a haraka. It would be easy if it had a haraka. Fatha, kasra, dhamma, we know exactly what to do. If it is fatha, tafkhim. Dhamma, tafkhim. Kasra, tarqiq. Here we have a sukoon. So we look at the letter that comes before it, and it is affected based upon the letter that comes before it. And so, if there is a dhamma before the ra that has sukoon upon it, then the ra has tafkhim. An example of that, مثلا, al-furqan. Al-furqan. We hear with fur, you can hear the fuller ra. Fur, even though it has sukoon. Furqan, furqan, fur. We hear this tafkhim present even though it has sukoon. Al-furqan. والرجز فهجر. والرجز فهجر. فهجر. We hear the tafkhim upon fahjur. Jur. Here, the ra falls at the end of the word, and that which come before it was a letter with dhamma upon it. And again, ikhwan, that is the general principle. If it comes at the end of the word, even if it is not itself, the actual haraka is not sukoon, but because we're stopping, then it has and takes the ruling of the letter that is sakin. Yani, so for مثلا فيها سرور, if we were to stop فيها سرور, here now we have stoppage. Therefore the ra, even though it had tanween upon it originally, it now has sukoon. It now has sukoon. Therefore we look at the letter before it, we see that the letter before it has dhamma, therefore it is recited with tafkhim. وسعر, likewise su'ur is, in its origin, it has يعني tanween upon it, but kasra. It has kasra. But because of the fact that we are not stopping upon the word, then even though it has kasra, أيها الإخوة, then one continues, or one stops upon it, using or reciting it with, again, that which is related to tafkhim. Even though the word itself has kasra. Su'urin, in its origin, it has su'ur, it has kasra. But we're not stopping, we're not continuing our recitation, we're stopping. يعني, as occurs in the ayah, نعم إنا إذا لفي ضلال وسعر, يعني إنا إذا لفي ضلال وسعر. Here, because we're stopping, وسعر, إنا إذا لفي ضلال وسعر. We hear the ra, it has, though we're stopping, it has something of tafkhim. وسعر. The fifth instance is that we have the ra having a sukoon upon it, but before it we have hamzatul wasl. Before it we have hamzatul wasl. If there is hamzatul wasl before it, even if the hamzatul wasl, the letter that is before the hamzatul wasl, has kasra, even if that is the case, because of the presence of hamzatul wasl before it, then the origin is that the letter is recited with tafkhim. The letter ra is recited with tafkhim. Hamzatul wasl, ikhwan, is the hamza or the alif that has no ordinary hamza that is written that looks like the head of the letter ha. Rather, it just has that small, what looks like a little balloon. Yani a balloon turned sideways. The hamzatul wasl, and sometimes it has nothing upon it. The hamzatul wasl, ikhwan, if it comes before ra with sukoon, ra as-sakin, then the ra as-sakin is recited with tafkhim. It is recited with tafkhim. And so, مثلا رب ارجعون, and so even though it has even though it has a kasra before it, ربي ارجعون, it is in its origin recited with tafkhim. ارجع والذي ارتضى يعني الذي ارتضى من ارتضى. All of these recitations or all of these manifestations are ra that follows a hamzatul wasl. When that is the case, then one recites with tafkhim. And that is, again, ikhwan, only with ra as-sakin. Only with ra as-sakin, if the ra has sukoon upon it. The next instance of the recitation of Ra with Tafkhim is if the Ra is Musakkan, that is, the Ra has Sukoon upon it, and the letter that preceded it has, number one, Kasra, and number two, the letter that comes after it is one of the letters of Isti'la that has Fatha upon it. I know that one is relatively tricky. But we'll recap. Number one, that the Ra has Kasra upon it. Secondly, the letter before it has Kasra. The letter before the Ra Afwan. Number one, the Ra has Sukoon upon it. My apologies. Number one, the Ra has Sukoon upon it. Number two, the letter before it has Kasra. Number three, the letter after it is from the letters of Isti'la, Khussa, Daghtin, Qidh. And number four, that letter has Fatha upon it. And so we have this Ra manifesting and circled by all of these scenarios and characteristics that affect it. And so we reiterate this one again. Firstly, the Ra has Sukoon upon it. Secondly, the letter before the Ra has Kasra upon it. Thirdly, the letter after the Ra is from the letters of Isti'la, Khussa, Daghtin, Qidh. And fourthly, that letter has Fatha upon it. And so the example, or an example of that, مثلا ولو نزلنا عليه كتابا في قرطاس قرطاس في قرطاس قرطاس. Again, we see the manifestation of these principles. Qaf has kasra upon it. Ra has sukoon upon it. It is followed by one of the letters of Isti'la, Ta. It has fatha upon it. Therefore, the Ra here is mufakham. The Ra is mufakham. وَلَوْ نزلنا عليه كتابا في قرطاس قرطاس في قرطاس قرطاس إرصادا إرصادا. Again, وإرصادا. The Hamza before it has kasra. The Ra itself has sukoon. The letter that follows it is from the letters of Isti'la, Sad, Khussa, Daghtin, Qidh. That Sad has fatha upon it. So here, Sad, the here is mufakham. Sad, Sad. Similarly, مثلا فرقة here فتحة عفوا fa that has a kasra upon it. Fir, the Ra has sukoon upon it. That which follows is one of the letters of Isti'la, Qaf, Khussa, Daghtin, Qidh, Qaf, one of the letters of Isti'la, and the Qaf has a fatha upon it. Firqa. And so the Ra here has tafkhim. Mirsada. Even though the letter before it has kasra, it is recited with tafkhim. لبالمرصاد مرصاد. So we hear the tafkhim upon mirsad. And the last scenario that we'll look at and we'll mention in relation to tafkhim is if the ra is sakin and one stops upon the ra, yani the ra comes at the end of a word. It is sakin because of the fact that it's come at the end of the word. It is sakin because of the fact that it comes at the end of a word. That which comes before the sakin, that which comes before, yani the ra, is another letter that has sukoon upon it. And before that letter that has sukoon upon it, we have a letter that has fatha upon it. And so in essence, we have a letter with fatha upon it. Then we have two letters with sukoon upon them, the last of them being ra, that has sukoon upon it because of the fact that we're stopping. And so, again, a letter that has fatha upon it, followed by a letter with sukoon, followed by the ra that comes at the end of whatever word it is, and that ra now has sukoon because we're stopping upon it. And there is an additional affair, and that is with the condition that the middle letter is not ya. The middle letter cannot be ya. Rather, it must be another letter other than ya. So the first letter has fatha. The second letter is a letter that has sukoon upon it other than ya. And the last letter is ra. And it has sukoon upon it because we're going to stop, even though it may not have sukoon if we were to continue. For example, إِنَّا أَنزَلْنَاهُ فِي لَيْلَةِ الْقَدْرِ. Qadr. Here we have qadr. Qaf, dal with the sukoon upon it. And the ra now has sukoon upon it because we're stopping. Where in its origin it is al-qadri. But because we're stopping, it becomes al-qadr with sukoon. Wal-asr. Wal-asr. Here, asr, we have ayn with fatha. Sad with sukoon. And the ra at the end now has sukoon because we're stopping. Wal-amr. ألا له الخلق والأمر. Here, amr, we have alif, or we have the hamza with sukoon, with the fatha. Then we have a mim with sukoon, and we have a ra, which though it doesn't have sukoon and it has a dhamma upon it, it now has sukoon because we're stopping. Well, it is in its origin wal amru. Wal amru. As occurs elsewhere, this word al-amru with fatha, al-amru with kasra, and so on. But here we have a sukoon upon it because we're going to stop. It is recited with tafkhim. Al-amr. Al-amr. An-nar. An-nar. Here we have an-nar in essence is a letter followed by a letter with sukoon, followed by a letter with ra. I know some of you may now have a confused face. How is it said that nar has sukoon in the middle, or that the middle letter has sukoon? That is because of the fact that nar, ikhwan, we have noon and we have alif, which is the letter of elongation, and then we have ra. The letter of elongation, ayyuha al-ikhwa, as occurs in the study of the sarf and the science of morphology, when alif extends a letter, even though it is not written, that which is upon the alif is a sukoon. Even though it is not written, that which is present upon the alif is a sukoon. Just as if you were to use ya to extend the letter, what would be upon the ya? If you were to say, for example, والتين والتين والزيتون. The ya in the middle of teen, between the ta and the noon, that ya has a sukoon upon it. That ya, it has a sukoon upon it. If you were to use waw to extend the letter, how would you write it? مثلا خوف. You have kha followed by a waw with a sukoon upon it, followed by fa. And so alif, when it is used to extend the letter, it is not, we do not have the sukoon written upon it, but it has sukoon upon it nonetheless. So an-nar is considered a letter with a sukoon upon it in the middle of noon and ra. And so an-nar is noon, alif with hamza, afwan with sukoon, ra with sukoon, because we're stopping. And so it is recited with tafkhim. Al-Fajr. Al-Fajr. Fajr here, fa, jim, the middle letter, which is other than ya, jim, with sukoon upon it. And then we have the ra at the end, because we're stopping upon it. Then we stop upon it with tafkhim. If we were to continue our recitation, then we would not consider it from the letters of tafkhim. وَالْفَجْرِ وَلَيَالٍ عَشْرٍ. وَالْفَجْرِ. If we continued and made wasl, then it is not considered from the huruf of tafkhim. وَالْفَجْرِ, rather it has a kasra upon it, and so it is muraqqaq. That then, ikhwan, in relation to the halat or the instances when ra is recited with tafkhim, those are the instances that we'll mention for this session, and tomorrow we'll look at ra when it is to be recited with tarqiq. And we have a similar amount of instances that we have when we're looking at the affair of ra, يعني with tarqiq. So we'll run up on that note. Wallahu ta'ala.